Welcome back, and we continue to follow that breaking news out of Iran and the search and rescue mission underway after Iran shut down a U.S. fighter jet. It is a significant moment in this war, and for the White House, with President Trump now a wartime president. Joining me now is our panel, USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page, Chris Meagher, former White House Deputy Press Secretary and a former assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs during the Biden administration, and Republican strategist Matt Gorman. Thanks to all of you for being here. We are having this conversation against the backdrop, Susan, of a significant moment. Put this into context. Could this be an inflection point in this war? Could it change the course of this war?
It could. It is not. This is not the developments that the president signaled in his address to the nation when he said that Iran's capabilities of doing just the sort of thing they have now done had been decimated. Clearly, they've been degraded, but not decimated yet. So it shows what the cost and potential cost of this war beyond simply driving up gas prices. And that could be part of Trump's calculation on what the United States is willing to do in Iran next.
Matt, we haven't heard from President Trump yet. Give me your reaction to that. When do you anticipate we might hear from him? And do you see this as a moment that could really shape the president's desire, as he laid out this Wednesday, to extract the United States from Iran? He said that the United States effectively was going to continue its attacks for the next 2 to 3 weeks. He didn't give a firm timeline, but he did signal he'd like to be out by then. If
he was planning on de-escalating the war, I felt like that time, Wednesday night, was the time to say it, really to actually give a firm thing, because all it really did was roil the markets a little more. So I expect, honestly, even regardless of this very tense situation with the shot down plane, I expect this to escalate before it de-escalates. Do we go into Cargyle and do we escalate a bombing campaign? I thought the general in your first block, his context was actually very important around how many sorties we've actually run. And this is, doesn't make the scenario better, but the fact that this was the first such incident I thought was notable. But again, I expect this to escalate and essentially really degrade this before we de-escalate.
Chris, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think on one hand, right, we've flown 10,000 sorties or something like that. This is one of the few incidents, if not the only incident, involving an aircraft, even though there have been a couple more today as well where people, it sounds like, are safe. On the other hand, it's a reminder to the American people that we don't want to be there in the first place. The vast majority of Americans disagree with the actions that the administration has taken. They're already feeling the pain at the pump. They've already heard about the 13 men and women who have lost their lives. Now there's a plane being shot down. It just feels like it adds to the chaos around this whole situation.
Susan, pick up on that point if you would, because if you look at the polls, as Chris is saying, this war is unpopular. The vast majority of Americans say they don't like it, even though Republicans still largely unified behind the president on this. You see those numbers, 60% disapprove in Reuters and YouGov. Do you think President Trump took a step toward winning over any of those skeptics?
I thought that was one of his goals of the speech. It was the kind of speech you usually give on day one of a military action, not on day 33. But we know from the polling that he has a really hard task here. You know, there was a Reuters poll that showed that two-thirds of Americans thought we should end the war even if we didn't reach all our goals. And that included 40% of Republicans. It shows the kind of appetite that Americans have to do whatever we're going to do and to get out.
Yeah. Matt, I want to play a little bit of Joe Rogan's podcast, who, with Theo Vaughn, extremely popular with the MAGA base. They were discussing the war this week. Take a look.
What do you think is going to happen? You think we're going to be okay?
I hope so. Of course. I don't know.
Do you think about it?
I'm confused. I can't believe we went to this war. When we started bombing Iran, I was like, this can't be true.
And what about Lebanon now?
I know. Israel's invaded Lebanon. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, just stop. Like, what do you need?
Matt, how significant is that? The polling shows the MAGA-based Republicans still largely unified behind the president, but those are significant voices who a lot of Republicans follow.
I would say normal people, too, but I don't think they're going to drive either the White House's thinking on this or even, to some extent, the MAGA base on this. If you were to ask me a month ago, I would have said this was driven, the kind of the tension in the base was driven by, for lack of a better term, the Israel haters, right? It was Tucker Carlson and the people where they're trying to, they have another agenda here. There is more skepticism in the base, especially when it comes to the funding. We've seen some numbers put out today and throughout the week of $200 billion, $1.5 trillion of what the defense cost will be for the war, and then also going forward. I will say this. I think in some respects, the polls could be freeing to him because, look, if you are already at a nadir, essentially, just keep going and actually end this once and for all, because you're not going to get 50% to support this war.
There's also the theory that if you've dug a hole, you're in a hole, stop digging.
Stop digging.
Yeah, that would be the alternative theory.
I would say this, though. I would say this. If you pull out without achieving the goals, the problem will fester. Like, there will be, again, whatever happens in Iran.
I think what you saw in that video is supporters of Donald Trump who heard him say, we're going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. We're going to bring down costs on day one. We're going to get out of these forever wars right away. Instead, we're still, Ukraine war is still going on. Prices are going up. And we're getting more deeply involved in the Middle East, in Venezuela, potentially with Cuba. He's doing the exact opposite of everything he promised on the campaign trail.
Respond to that very quickly. No.
Look, I think that is a challenge. I think that's why they need a story on affordability. And you saw a good jobs report today, but they need to keep telling that story. The more we get into Iran, even though it's worthy, it can take away from that.
All right. Fantastic conversation. Please stick around. We have a lot more. But right now, I do want to bring in former Secretary of Defense during President Trump's first term, Mark Esper. Secretary Esper, thank you so much for joining me on this really critical day. I want to start off by getting your reaction to the fact that Iran was able to shoot down a U.S. F-15 fighter jet. What are the implications for that, not just in terms of Iran's air defense capabilities, but also in terms of the broader war?
Well, first of all, good to be with you, Kristen. Look, I'm glad to see that, of course, we rescued the pilot. That's great news. But, of course, we have now the other officers out there somewhere, we assume hiding, trying to escape and evade from the Iranian guards who are trying to chase him or her down and capture him. Obviously, it's significant that an American aircraft was shot down in light of what the president said the other night with regard to how devastated or whatever other verb he used to describe their air defenses. But clearly they have some capabilities still, and not just with air defense, but with ballistic missiles and drones and other things that we've heard about here in the last 24, 48 hours. So, of course, our thoughts and prayers are with this airman who's out there, and it's very important that we find that pilot and retrieve them, because obviously if the Iranians get that person, it could be a significant political chip in this conflict.
Absolutely. Everyone, I think it's safe to say, hoping, praying for that pilot's safe return. Mr. Secretary, what are the implications of this moment for the trajectory of this war? President Trump, when he spoke on Wednesday, signaled that he wanted to wind this war down in a matter of weeks. Could this moment complicate that timeline?
Probably so. It becomes, again, if this airman is captured and taken hostage, it adds another wrinkle to the negotiation that has to be worked out. And of course, we don't know which way this is going to play more broadly. You often think about famous Somalia, Mogadishu with Black Hawk Down, where the downing of an American aircraft there changed the nature of the battle on the ground. The question is, will this change the nature of the war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran? It's hard to say, or it could be not have as much impact. Only time is going to tell with regard to whether we get the airmen back or not. That's significant. If the Iranians do, then how do they manage that hostage? Do they take the person hostage? How do they treat them? Do they parade them out there politically to mock the United States? A lot's going to depend on how they treat that individual also.
Secretary Esper, take us inside your understanding. You have served with President Trump during his first administration. What are the conversations that you anticipate are unfolding right now? Do you think that there is significant discussion about a potential retaliation?
I would hope right now that every level of the chain of command, from the president on down to the unit that these officers were in, are focused on rescuing that remaining airman who's out there. And I assume that that is the focus, 100%. Finding that person, getting them, rescuing them, and recovering them as quickly as possible before the Iranians get their arms around them. So to me, that should be the focus right now. Everything else can be sorted out later with regard to retaliation or whatever else you want to do. But right now, recovering that individual is the key thing.
And your understanding of the extent to which and the way in which these pilots are trained for this very moment when the worst happens, if this pilot is still alive, undoubtedly fighting for their life.
Yes, they all go through SERE training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training. And it's a very demanding, extensive training course built for just these situations. And so right now they're in the survival and the evade mode, trying to stay away from the Iranians. And of course, they have on them the ability to communicate and defend themselves, but really communicate with higher headquarters to signal their location and arrange the pickup as that moment approaches. So right now, that is the focus, I'm sure, of that individual on the ground, is get to a safe space somewhere where they won't be found. If they could be found, maybe they can defend themselves, but really wait them out. It's darkness now in Iran, so that helps in many ways the recovery of this downed pilot and for us to get to that pilot sooner rather than later.
And as we're having this conversation, Secretary Esper, I was just handed a little bit more information about what has unfolded today. This comes to us, according to our team, including Courtney Kuby, who reports in total Iran has caused 2 military aircraft to crash, the F-15 and an A-10, and 2 Black Hawk helicopters in a single day, less than 48 hours after President Trump said in his primetime address that Iran has been completely decimated. Again, one of the pilots, the one in the initial F-15 that was hit, has been rescued, is alive. They continue to search for the second one. Big picture, Mr. Secretary, President Trump has said he thinks that Iran wants to make a deal. Could this moment complicate any diplomatic negotiations, if there are any, in fact, happening?
I'd say 2 things. First of all, the United States military has clearly made great progress in terms of achieving its objectives. And Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, has laid them out with regard to degrading the Navy, degrading the Air Force, going after the ballistic missiles, drones, and production capabilities, and talking about the nuclear infrastructure, although it's something we've heard a lot less of this time around. That said, while great progress is made over the, 4 or 5 weeks now, and over 11,000 plus sorties, what has transpired here in the last 24 hours for sure, and certainly over the last few weeks, as Iran continues to launch a couple dozen ballistic missiles and several dozen drones each day toward Israel and the Arab partners, is that they still have capability. And not just capability, they still have a willingness to fight. And so what that tells me now, zooming out to the second question you've asked, Kristen, is I believe the regime feels emboldened and that they're not going to roll over anytime soon. They seem to have suppressed the people well enough that they're not afraid of any uprising. And there doesn't appear to be any fractures within the government itself or the IRGC. We had, of course, the DNI say this just a couple weeks ago or a week and a half ago on Capitol Hill. So in my mind, they feel strong. They feel emboldened that they can. They've taken the brunt of American and Israeli attacks. And I just assume that the shoot down of American aircraft today will embolden them further. I hope I'm wrong, because it's very important that we gain the upper hand here, retain the upper hand, and achieve all of our objectives. And it's, again, war is a contest of wills, and the question is who will hold out the longest.
Well, you take me to my next question, because if you listen to the president's address to the nation this Wednesday, one aspect of this that he did not speak to specifically was whether or not he plans to put U.S. forces on the ground inside Iran. Do you think this moment will make it more likely? Because we know that he's mobilized tens of thousands of U.S. troops in the region. Does this increase the chances that he may, in fact, send U.S. forces into Iran?
I think it's too early to say, Kristen. I think the president's right by not taking that option off the table, and I think he's right by deploying forces to the region to give him options. I think that's the duty, as I always thought my duty, to give the president as many options as possible. I think the time to tell will be April 6th, which is the deadline he gave for the Iranians to either come back and agree to his demands. That's option one. Or number two, he may extend the deadline. Or three, maybe he just declares victory and pulls U.S. forces out of the region. But to me, April 6th, this upcoming Monday, will be the date by which we have a little bit more clarity on which path he chooses.
Secretary Esper, we really appreciate your insights today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kristen.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.